shall I render to the Lord for all his bounty to me?
Welcome to Veiled in Grace. I'm Kyra.
And I'm Anna. We are Cradle Orthodox Christians.
And we're here to talk about what it's like to be Orthodox women
in a very non-Orthodox world. So today, we'd like to talk about something that brings up a lot of feelings.
For many people.
Confusion, curiosity, and even discomfort. Head coverings. Dun, dun, dun.
Probably one of the top searched things in Orthodox women's groups. Or
even,
banned things. Banned discussions.
Yeah, they get too heated.
And
even in person. I was at a church tour recently, and that was like one of the questions for the priest was like, what's this deal with head coverings? You know, an outsider, non-Orthodox person. And it's really like people just don't, it's not a part of our culture. So
they don't know and they don't understand.
Yeah. And it's an act of reverence and humility. So it doesn't have to be so, I guess, heated and debated, but it is. So we're here today to kind of discuss all the different sides of it, and we're not debating it. We're not telling you what to do. We're just discussing all the things surrounding it. So hopefully people just have a better understanding and empathy and support for other women.
And the thing with head coverings and really all of the topics that we're talking about, and we've discussed this before, is that neither of us have our MDiv. We are Orthodox women, moms, wives, and yes, we grew up in the faith, but we are learning a lot of things as we get older, and some of the things we don't even fully understand ourselves, and that's okay. But the point is that we should continue the conversation, and it's great to have other people here listening too, because maybe they'll hear something today that will open up their eyes to a different perspective that they had not seen before. So what is the scriptural, foundation of head covering? When the conversation begins, where does it get turned back to? So the scriptural foundation of it comes from 1 Corinthians 11, usually anywhere from like 2 to 15, but specifically 1 Corinthians 11:5 says, and this is St. Paul, says, "But every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head, for that is one and the same as if her head were shaved." So, what do people think when they hear this? That's where it gets confusing, because we have a lot of friends in, the Protestant world and in the Catholic world that they also head cover. It's not just Orthodox Christians that head cover, and we all turn back to the same scriptural basis. But in Orthodoxy, we generally are told by church fathers, by our priest, and through tradition that head covering is something that's meant to be done when women are worshiping together as part of the body of Christ, together as a church. That differs from other denominations because some will argue that head covering is something that should be done all the time. And in Orthodoxy, we look at it and we say, well, St. Paul was speaking to the Corinthians, the church of Corinth. And when speaking to that church, he was speaking to them with the assumption that this was a directive given to them when they are praying together. So I know for us, and we'll get into our personal experiences with it, we both cover our heads when we are within the church setting and praying with other members of the church. Now, reading on in here, you will get into St. Paul saying that our heads should also be covered because of the angels, which is confusing. There are a lot of people that don't understand that, and I'm not going to say that I fully understand it
Just
either.
So do you know what it means by the angels?
So there's a priest that we'll link his video. He had a pretty popular video, something that went viral like a year ago, 2 years ago, that his sermon gave a really great explanation, and he talked a lot about the reasoning behind the statement for the angels. Because I have friends that head cover that are Protestant, and if you ask them why they head cover, their reasoning is for the angels. And if you push a little further and say, well, what does that mean? They just say, because of the angels. Mm-hmm. There's no answer to it. So, in my own research and digging into it further, I've found different reasonings from different priests, but the church as a whole, you look at church, and when we are together and we are worshiping, we know that the angels are present. We know that we are surrounded by them as witnesses, by co-worshipers. They are in the church with us. So if we are supposed to be covering because of the angels, we at least have that going for us. We at least know that when we're in the church, we're surrounded by angels. Mm-hmm. So to me, I feel like I at least have some sort of basis and answer to be like, well, because the angels are present when we're worshiping as a church community. So when St. Paul was giving this instruction, he was giving it as a liturgical instruction, not necessarily as a universal command of women should cover their heads all the time. If it was something more than that, then it's something that we would see in the apostolic canons, or we would see addressed somewhere else. So not to downplay the importance of it, but it was given as a thing to help us keep order and humility within the church. Are there other saints that you could share or that you know of that have spoken on head coverings and the importance of them, or really what they mean?
Yeah, so this is actually coming from St. John Chrysostom. It's an article off of the Orthodox Ethos website that I can link to. It's actually the article that I read that really helped me understand the reasoning behind head covering, and that ultimately got me to start doing it. I'm not sure that I agree with every single aspect of the article, but it was very well written and helped me. Yes, eye-opening, enlightening, and helped me. It helped answer the questions I had my whole life. So St. John, he says, let me get to the next page. I highlighted some things. I won't read the whole thing. But he says, but the woman he, St. Paul, commands to be at all times covered. Wherefore, also having said, every woman that prayeth or prophesieth with her head unveiled dishonoreth her head. He stayed not at this point only, but also proceeded to say, for it is one and the same thing as if she were shaven. But if to be shaven is always dishonorable, it is plain, too, that being uncovered is always a reproach. And not even with this only was he content, but added again, saying, the woman ought to have a sign of authority on her head because of the angels. He signifies that not at the time of prayer only, but also continually she ought to be covered. If a woman is not veiled, let her also be shorn. But if it be a shame for a woman to be shorn or shaven, let her be veiled. Thus, in the beginning, he simply requires that the head be not bare, but as he proceeds, he intimates both the continuance of the rule, saying, for it is one and the same thing as if she were shaven, and the keeping of it with all care and diligence. For he said not merely covered, but covered over, meaning that she be carefully wrapped up on every side. And by reducing it to an absurdity, he appeals to their shame, saying by way of severe reprimand, but if she be not covered, let her also be shorn, as if he had said, If thou cast away the covering appointed by the law of God, cast away likewise that appointed by nature. Now, I said I wasn't going to read the whole thing, but as I started, I felt like I needed to read the whole thing. So there is support for always veiling. And we do know that up until probably the last century, most women, when they were out of doors, would put a head covering on. So that was something that was just part of culture for centuries. And now we live in a culture that doesn't do that. So it's confusing.
And it was culturally appropriate for women in biblical times to have their heads covered all the time. And that wasn't just a church thing. That was like a cultural thing. And so I think there was a lot of confusion that arose when there was this separation of like, is covering your head just a cultural thing, or is it actually a religious thing? And the scriptural argument that people have is that we're called to pray all the time.
Right.
And I'm not arguing that we should pray all the time, but the interpretation that the Orthodox Church has taken on it is that the specific directive to cover our head, though, is in the context of the church setting, not necessarily at all times. Now, my own personal opinion on it, if covering your head all the time reminds you to pray more frequently and reminds you to think about the actions that you're taking in your day-to-day life, similarly to how you dress, your modesty, things like that, then do it.
Right. And if it helps you be humble and reverent and pious, wonderful.
If you're doing it for more than a fashion statement and you're doing it because it will personally help you remember to pray more frequently, then that's wonderful. I don't see any reason why you shouldn't be able to,
right,
if you would like to.
Because there's the opposite of doing something. It's like false piety, doing something.
Yeah.
Just
to draw the attention.
To draw the attention, or, which ends up making you not as humble. And so now is it defeating the purpose? So that's why in Orthodoxy, we're not so legalistic as other denominations might be. There is a fluidity. Yes, we have our scripture and we have our saints and we have our canons and our doctrine and dogma, but we also have grace. And
it's meant to be done out of humility and to help keep order in the church. You have God, man, woman. And it helps remind us of that order, honestly. I mean, my husband and I were talking about head coverings even before I came here this evening when I was telling him what our topic was for the evening. And he was expressing even that he doesn't even know what it's like. He's a man, so he doesn't understand fully, even in the way that women do and how we feel about it, because it's something that is special and it sets women apart from men. I think sometimes people get confused and think that it is something that's meant to like keep men out of like sexual temptation. Mm-hmm. I've heard that argument. Have you heard that before from people? That
just
like,
more of a modesty.
Yeah, that like it's meant to be done out of modesty within the church. And I'm not saying that it can't be done in that sense. I think that there is an aspect of like how we dress and how we present ourselves in the church. We should always be a little considerate of other people. I remember growing up and like having my hair like hugely curled and like all this stuff done, and looking back, like that probably did draw a lot of attention to myself. And if covering my head now is something that draws a little less attention to myself, then I guess that's a good thing.
Right. Yeah. Because I have friends who I've, only really see them with their head covered at church. And so the times when I would see them without it and their hair down and flowing, I was like, oh my goodness, you have beautiful hair. And it really does make them more beautiful, more, and so I can understand why, especially in church, it's a good thing to not be so attractive to.
Yeah, and it's not like it's on women and it's on us to
do it for men.
Yeah, to do it for men.
Yeah.
It's not like it is our responsibility to do it specifically for the men of the church. We're doing it because we're women, and that's what women are called to do. But it is kind and appropriate in all aspects of being within the church context to do things that try to prevent your sibling in Christ from stumbling. So if that helps, then I don't see that being a problem.
Even women, though, because women admire each other on just a basic friend level of like, oh, your hair looks so nice today. So it's just one less distraction while you're trying to worship and pray of looking at somebody's beautiful hair.
And even with my own head covering. So like I'll talk in a little bit about like my journey and your journey of like kind of how we started. But I will say that like when I do cover my head in church now, I found that from the time that I started, I would use kind of any sort of head covering. And I've really tried to like simplify my head coverings to the point that I like try to choose things that don't have designs on them anymore or don't have like a lot going on, because I'm kind of like, I'm drawing more attention to myself if I'm wearing a head covering with like neon polka dots on it. Is that, I know St. Paul isn't here saying what type of this or that, but personally I have kind of backed up and been like, yeah, I'm gonna stick to like very basic floral prints or things that are more traditional or just solid colors, because I feel like it's less distracting. Mm-hmm. And when you're in church, you should be less distracting if possible. I already have 3, almost 4 children running around distracting people. Like I don't need my head covering to also be a distraction to people.
Yes, yeah. Because even you can be dressed modestly, but if it's like too glamorous or elegant, it's not your wedding day. Wedding day, there's an exception there.
The goal is to be humble in life, not just in church, but in life. Like we should try to be humble people and make conscious decisions to help us be humble. But so with regards to head coverings though, I have some, so my husband was laughing when I said I had strong opinions about it, but I do. I have, I think he gave me the look like you have strong opinions about everything, which he's not wrong.
Touché.
But I have semi-strong opinions about the phrase that head covering is a personal conviction. Mm. A personal conviction. And I say that because I hear that a lot when I'm in a head covering movement group online, and there are a lot of Protestant women, it's some Orthodox women, some Catholic women, a lot of Protestant women that are like kind of reviving head coverings based solely on the scriptural foundation of it. And they will argue that like it's a personal conviction. And in the Orthodox groups even, I think that that's where a lot of arguments stem, is that when people ask, should I be covering my head? Should I this? Should I that? People will go on and respond and say, well, it's a personal conviction. I told my husband, I looked at him and I'm like, Christianity is a personal conviction. Like, you choose whether you believe that you are a follower of Christ or you are not. So calling something within the context of the church a personal conviction doesn't feel right to me. And I made some notes here that Orthodoxy is not up for individual interpretation. That's the beautiful thing about the church, is that
it tells you all you need.
It tells us what we need.
Yeah.
And it tells us when there are certain things that we don't know the answers to, and that's fine. And usually your spiritual father will tell you to leave it at that. There are some things that we're not meant to dig deeper into because we don't truly know the answer to. And that's fine. That's where your faith and your trust in God comes into play. But it's not up for individual interpretation. It's not up for like, this is the scriptural basis. How do you feel about it? Or how do you feel about it? It's not a personal, how do I feel or what do I think about it? There should not be private discernment outside of the church. Like, to me, Orthodox Christians, we live within the body of the church. We are saved within the body of the church. We aren't saved alone. And I feel that calling it a personal conviction is slightly misleading. I think that the term calling it a private conviction within the church setting is much more appropriate. And my husband looked at me and was like, okay, valid. But it's part of a received practice. Like, head covering in the Orthodox Church, despite the fact that it has often been forgotten. And I think part of that was, like, in the United States specifically, like, women covering their heads was a cultural thing. And then I think the feminist movement, which, like I've said before and we've talked about before, ironically is like semi-anti-feminist, pushed people away from that, but they also pushed people away from it religiously, not just culturally, and then made people think that it was a personal thing that they get to decide, when really it's always been
a tradition of the church.
Mm-hmm. Just there are many traditions of the church that, just because they're not practiced in every Orthodox church, doesn't mean that they aren't a tradition of the church. The priest walking around doing the great entrance, and the people in the church touching the hem of the garment, that's a tradition of the church. Some could argue that you should do it or that you shouldn't do it or whatever reason, but like, there are traditions that have been passed down, and just because it's been forgotten doesn't mean that.
Or came from different cultural backgrounds. You know, Orthodoxy, yes, it started in Greece, but it went to Russia and kind of formed its own, you know, cultural traditions. It went to the more of the Middle East, and that they formed their cultural traditions of, you know, the people who lived there. Then it came to Alaska, and it formed, you know, so there are definitely different cultural traditions that intertwine within the big T church traditions. So that's why we get some variances, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't church tradition.
And here's the danger with it, though. Like, how do you handle head covering when certain churches that are Orthodox churches make it seem like it is more than just a tradition? Does that make sense? Like,
making it mandatory?
Like making
churches
it
that
like
make it mandatory.
Churches that make it mandatory. Because while I am pretty like strong set on, I don't think that it's a personal conviction, I think that it's a private conviction. And when I say private, I think that it is something that you need to feel convicted to do, but that you should be speaking with your spiritual father about and asking for their direction and guidance on it.
To work toward it,
because
not just an either or.
Everyone is at a different stage of their faith. So if you don't cover your head, that doesn't make you any less
of an Orthodox Christian
than I am.
Yeah.
But how do you handle it, and how do you navigate it when it is hurting your heart in a way because it's mandatory?
Yeah, I agree. I have how to say it, you know, I have feelings about that.
She also has strong opinions. Her husband might also agree.
I'm just hesitant to, I don't know, I kind of go back and forth. Sometimes it is nice for like the rules to be there and just tell me what to do and I'll do it.
But when you have the rules, that's the argument of like, where does it say that that's the rules?
Right. Which it does say in the Bible. I don't know. You know, so I do go back and forth because there are churches. Our church is not one of them that requires you to cover your head, but it is encouraged. But there are other churches, even in our town, that do require it. And that's great that people coming in, they know what the expectation is and you either accept it or you don't. However, I feel like there's so many people, myself included, who didn't always head cover, that like we're all on a spiritual journey. And if that's something that might take someone a little bit longer to get to, but other things they're able to work on, they should at least be allowed to be working on it in the church until they can get there. again, this is just my like back and forth.
Well, and it's kind of like when people are new to Orthodoxy and they walk into the church, you can't expect them to know how to do things properly. You can't expect them to know to move this way when we do the great entrance, or you can't expect them to know that we do this at this time, or we generally it's appropriate to light the candles at this time. If you make something mandatory and a requirement to even step foot in the church
before knowing why,
where's the education part of it? Where is the explanation? Is there someone at the door that says you must cover your head? Let's talk about it. Because
it's usually a sign, right? In those churches, I feel like there's a sign and then there's head coverings for you, which in a monastery, that's understandable. That's somebody's home. And so you respect which I guess somebody's going to say, this is Christ's home and this is...
But even in some monasteries, they still won't. I grew up and I had gone to Holy Transfiguration and I didn't wear a head covering when I went there.
Yeah, I mean, they're not always required. Like I said, in Guatemala, you were required in the church, but not like on the grounds.
Yeah.
But these are both female monasteries, so I guess there might be a difference there. That could be, explored.
It's part of like a...
Because the male monasteries are very different.
Yeah.
But in Greece, at least the ones I went to, none of them required us to cover our heads. You had to have a skirt, or you used like they had like a wrap to use as a skirt, or as, like cover shoulders and whatnot, but not head coverings. And because I went into the one church I had like a sun hat, and I was like, well, I don't have a head covering, so I'll just wear that. And then nun was like, can you please remove your hat? I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't have a head covering, so I just thought this would be better. And she's like, oh, are you Orthodox? And I was like, yes. She's like, okay, but we still don't... You're not allowed to wear hats. It's too modern, she told me. So I was like, okay, that's fine.
Again, draws attention to yourself. So it's like...
Yeah.
I think that there's this important aspect of head covering and the journey to begin head covering that includes education and learning to accept and feel and recognize the beauty of the reverence that surrounds it.
Right, like there's a catechumen period for a reason.
Yeah.
And that can be part of it. And there are so many other things that are a part of that learning process. Why are the head coverings not? I don't know. Again, I'm not trying to pick any fights.
Yeah.
These are just questions I have.
They're questions that we both have asked, and we on our own and with
not saying I agree one way or the other, but these are just questions I have.
Yeah, and I fully understand why people are so confused. But what I don't love about it is just the like anger and like, that comes from people when they have very strong opinions on like, I don't have to head cover.
Or
so,
you should head cover.
You should
Either way.
Either way, like that's why it's a banned topic in a lot of Orthodox groups, because we forget to act like Orthodox Christians.
Right, it's not meant to divide.
Talk about it. It's not meant to divide us, and it makes me sad because like truly it is tradition. Like you can't argue that it's tradition of the church. Like it's like you saying that certain traditions of the church just don't matter,
right?
Which is not accurate. Like you can't just like cherry pick traditions of the church. Now, how they look applied in your own home parish might differ from someone else's, but you can't forget the fact that it once existed and right. I mean, seems to now be making a comeback, which is really exciting. So
yeah, because we have, I'd say we're at the point now where like mostly converts at our parish, and
except for us,
and right, there's just like a few of us cradles left, and they usually, like the majority of them, have no problem.
They accept it more than those that were born and raised
They were the
Orthodox.
ones that kind of inspired us cradles to be like, oh, maybe we should be covering our heads. That's how it basically happened.
Yeah, so can you talk about what your journey looked like? Like we both grew up Orthodox. We both grew up not covering our heads. And now we do.
Correct.
So how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so I was in the Orthodox Church in America, and there were maybe a couple people who would cover their heads. I was at a very small parish, but it was probably the older women who would cover their heads. And I do remember asking, I think my mom at the time, like, why do the old ladies cover their heads? And she really had no idea. And she just thought, oh, I think it's just a cultural, they're from Russia. And so
Because
that's what
for
they
them,
do.
it might have been a cultural thing
Right,
too.
right. They might, I don't really know my Russian
My Baba
geography,
always had
but
a
like,
head covering on, and it was a cultural thing.
exactly. My grandma, same thing. Like when she'd go out of the house for her walk, she'd cover her head. But she wouldn't cover her head in church, though.
I know. I noticed that too. That was the thing, the division between the cultural and the religious thing.
So they hung on to that cultural side of it, but then the tradition of the church, it kind of went away. So it was just very interesting. So that's all I knew. Oh, it's cultural. And then I went to an OCA parish in New York City, and same thing. It was not there. There was some Ethiopians there. They covered. And, like some people might have, but it was mostly uncovered, the women. But I never really asked ever since I was little. I just assumed it was cultural. That was it. And then all of a sudden, after 2020, and we start getting all of these converts in who are openly and willingly covering their heads, I'm starting to feel like, what do they know that I don't know?
Yeah.
And so I had
the research that we didn't do.
Right, exactly, because we weren't converts.
Yeah.
So I love how people say, even as Cradle Orthodox Christians, at some point we have to convert in our journey.
Yeah.
We have to make that active decision to not only follow the faith and stay in the church, but to educate ourselves and to continue that education until the day we die, and continue that repentance and continue that growth. So we do, in a sense, have to make that decision to convert and just start doing our due diligence.
You make the private conviction.
Yes.
You have a private conviction.
Right.
Within the context of the church.
Working with your spiritual father.
Working with your spiritual father.
Or your godparents, or, the community around you. So yeah, that was it. I basically, I was asking the questions, and then all of a sudden this article came up and it answered all of my questions. It's in the Bible, and it showed me where in the Bible. It's in the saints talk about it. It showed me what the saints said about it. And then it also says about how when you look at the icons of all the female saints, almost all of them have their head covered by either a covering or a crown, except for
Saint Mary of Egypt.
Saint Mary of Egypt, who's one of the largest female saints in the Orthodox faith. And she doesn't have her head covered because she was living.
She had no clothes.
She had no clothes except for the cloak of Saint Zosimus, who gave him his cloak. And so that's all she had, because she was naked at first. And she said, "Father, don't look at me." So he couldn't even look. He had to hand her cloak because she didn't have clothes, because she lived in the desert for like 40 years.
The holiest of people cannot cover their heads.
Correct. And I think of even Saint Olga. Yes, she's covered here. And in church, her head was always covered. I'm assuming that's their tradition. In Alaska, most of them cover their heads in churches. But I've seen pictures of her in her day-to-day uncovered. Yet she's still a holy saint. So
how did you feel when you made the decision to start covering your head?
I felt a little not embarrassed, I guess maybe a little embarrassed, because it was like something new that I was doing that everybody knew that I didn't do before.
Yeah. My
family's there. They know I didn't do it. And so I do remember at one point my dad being like, "So why'd you start covering your head?"
When you're like, "I just hope nobody asks
Yes.
me."
And of
because
course,
it's taken me this long to get here.
Leave it to your father. Be like, "Why are you covering your head now?" Not in non-accusatory. He was just genuinely curious because, again, men they don't research this because it's not something that they have to deal with. Like, that's not a concern of theirs. So they don't know either. He didn't know. So I had to explain to him. He's like, "Oh, okay." And then all of a sudden my mom started covering her
I was
head.
going to say, if you're not going to throw her out there, I'm going to throw her out there because I know she'll listen. But it's a beautiful thing. The moment your mom walked into church and had a head covering on, and I'm like, "Hey."
Yes.
Hey.
And it, to me, I was like, oh, and same thing with her. She never knew why, and so she listened to that video when you had shared it in our church group.
It was really impactful.
And that really helped her be like,
sometimes
okay,
you just
I
need to
can-
make it make sense.
Yeah. And so to her, she's like, okay, this makes sense. I'll do it.
Yeah.
It's not an oppressive anti-feminist movement. It's church tradition. And I can get behind that. So tell me about your experience growing up and then choosing to veil.
Veiled in grace. How fitting. Part of the name decision there. So I also grew up attending an OCA church, and I honestly didn't even know what head coverings were. Didn't even realize that was a thing. I don't think there were any women that I can remember in my parish, and we were not a small church. Like, we were over 100 people. The only people that I remember covering, like we were saying, did so more in a cultural way because they were immigrants from Slovakia, and they would cover their heads outside the church and then take off their head covering inside of the church. Maybe they also just didn't know. I'm not sure. I never got to ask my Bubba that. But I didn't even realize that it was a thing. I had gone to monasteries, visited them before, and visiting the monasteries saw the nuns had their heads covered. But a lot of times that I visited, there weren't a lot of other people there. And so I didn't see a lot of other people wearing head coverings either. And it wasn't really until when I got married and I started joining Orthodox groups that I saw the conversation coming up about head coverings. And I'm like, what is that? 22 years old or something like that. I'm like, what does that mean? And I started doing some research into it, and I think more than I let on or even talk to people about, honestly, and even my husband, I didn't talk to him a lot about it. I really internally felt like head covering was what I should be doing and what aligned with Orthodoxy for far longer than I actually did. And part of my realization in conjunction with like readings that I had done was just walking in the church and looking around and realizing that every single woman in every single icon, with the exception of St. Mary of Egypt, had her head covered. And I'm like, this has taken me 22 years in Orthodox churches all around the world to realize that every woman depicted in every icon has her head covered. And it really hit me then. I was like, why am I not covering my head? And it really was a like selfish, fearful thing that stopped me from doing it sooner. So I started covering my head probably full time in church like a year or so, I think, before you did, because I did before, like right before COVID era. And at that time, the only people that were covering their heads really in our church were my two sister-in-laws. And I think I finally just like committed to it one day and was like, I have felt like I should be covering my head since like the moment we got married and I found out that it was a thing. And I see my sister-in-laws both doing it in a parish that had at that time many other women who weren't doing it, and they didn't even bat an eye. And I'm like, I just need to do it, and I'm going to feel uncomfortable, but that's okay, because didn't know at the time, I think that uncomfortable feeling will go away. Hopefully. I pray that it will go away. And it did. I was covering my head from then on out every time that I was at our church. And now when I cover my head, it is honestly a very peaceful thing. Like if I am ever like approaching the church and don't have a head covering and I'm like trying to find one, I kind of feel naked. Like it feels like something is missing, because it feels like this thing that like completes me. And it might sound weird, but like I honestly feel like I put on my head covering and I'm like being like wrapped. Like that I'm like under the veil of the Theotokos. Like I'm just protected just like how she is, protecting us. And it really has become a very peaceful thing. And there's a lot less people that will pay attention to you than you think there will be. And I mean, I know your parents asked you, but there's a lot less people that will come up and talk to you about it than you realize, other than maybe someone in Walmart if you happen to have not taken it off, like when you go there. But it really has become a very peaceful thing, and I read a lot on it, and I follow a lot of threads on women that talk about it because I am curious to learn their different opinions on it. And I will say that the only uncomfortable times that I find now are when I went to churches that I had gone to regularly before, and I knew that there are not a lot of people there, if anyone, that head covers. And it's the fine line of like, I'm going to walk in with a head covering on. It's probably going to draw attention to myself. Mm-hmm. So I purposefully would choose head coverings that I knew my head was covered, and I knew that I was doing what the church teaches, but I was trying to draw a little less attention to myself, because you'll stick out like a sore thumb if you're the only person in the entire church that has your head covered. And that part of it is just being confident in your decision and knowing that like what I'm doing isn't wrong. So
that reminds me of this summer I went to my great uncle's funeral, who passed at 102 years old, memory eternal. And same thing, I was obviously going to cover my head like I normally do in church.
This was an Orthodox church?
This was an Orthodox church at my grandma's church, and I knew that not many women cover there. And so, and obviously we're dressed in black, and so it's a black head covering, and it was summer, it was hot, whatever, but it was, but I still did it. And afterwards, a one distant cousin came up to me who was born and baptized and raised Orthodox, but no longer attends an Orthodox church. And he came up to me and was like, I really love that you're covering your head. I don't see that anymore. And it really touched me. Like it moved me. And I was like, oh, thank God.
I'm glad that that's what you had to say.
Yes. But it was like really, because it makes me sad that he's not in the church, but the fact that he at least like noticed that and felt called to, like he felt, convicted. And
like there's a reason that we preserve all of these
yes.
beautiful holy traditions of
right.
the church. And just because one seems to have been forgotten doesn't mean that we shouldn't bring it back. Mm-hmm. Like that, I think is part of what the beauty of like the internet has been, mm-hmm. is that I think there's a lot of people in many places that, I mean, me personally, if it weren't for the internet, wouldn't have learned about head coverings. I mean, I might have, but
the Lord would have had to show you a different way.
To show me in a different way, because
yeah.
that's how I originally found it. Are there any other common like questions or misconceptions about head coverings that you can think of?
One thing that comes to mind is I read it in a group once. I don't know how historically accurate this information is. Don't quote me on it, but
someone will.
It gave me some empathy because, like I said, there are a lot of places in Greece where women don't cover. And I read that it had something to do with when the Muslims came in, they didn't want to be associated as a Muslim, so they wouldn't cover their head so they wouldn't appear as a Muslim. I don't know if this is true, but
I could see that because a lot of women in Greek churches in the United States don't cover.
Right, so I think that kind of transferred over.
Cultural in the United States, that isn't necessarily an issue now. So that again is maybe where like you need to speak to your priest about it and realize that like if that's not a cultural issue for where you live, then what is stopping you now mm-hmm. from upholding that tradition?
Yeah, and I saw this one video, I think it was like a short of this nun explaining like the way monastics dress, like their purpose and reasoning behind it. to help people see that it's not like the Muslim Islamic culture of why they dress that way. So I could understand how there's misconceptions revolving around that. And, you know, because when you look for any like modest apparel, it gets thrown in with Muslim or Orthodox Jews, and which are all traditional cultures, which is those are all good cultural traditions, but we have church tradition for specific reasons that are not their reasons for doing things.
Exactly. I know that there will be questions about what we use as head coverings.
How do you do it?
How do we do it? Where do you do it? Where do you buy your things? That is like a whole conversation. So I don't think that we're going to include all of that in this
Maybe
episode,
we'll do some shorts.
But we will do some shorts that will show you like what we use. And the question's always like, how do I keep my kid from yanking off my head covering? Well, you're in luck. I've got lots of kids and they're all really young and rambunctious. So
lots of experience
with that over the past 7 years now. So we will look for the shorts. We'll share some shorts showing what we use and maybe some places that we bought them from that aren't just thrift stores.
But mostly thrift stores.
I have a couple places that I like to buy them from. But
and now I just ordered some from a teen at our church who crochets them. So I ordered 4 different colors.
And there are people that sell them too online that are crocheted. So we'll make some shorts that will show you what we use, what it looks like.
Well, so that's it. You know, whether you choose to cover or you're still on that journey and you're not ready to do that, that's okay. That's your journey. Whatever you're doing, do it with peace and love. Don't judge your fellow sister. Either way, if they are doing it or not doing it, that's not your place. It's not your journey. Be thankful either way of where you're at, and just ask the Lord to help you on your own walk and how you can support your fellow sisters in your parish or online. Be kind. But just, prayerful discernment, seek counsel from your priest, respect others' choices, and avoid comparing yourself, even avoid comparing your head coverings, like what kind you're doing. Because if you choose to cover, you know, we are to do it with humility and reverence, and not to bring more attention to ourselves. There's actually a good scriptural closing scripture that I really liked. 1 Samuel 16:7. God looks at the heart. And that's what matters. That's what St. Mary of Egypt, he saw her heart, and St. Olga and all of the saints before us and all of us, he sees our heart. And that's what is most important.
Thank you for tuning in to Veiled in Grace. We are an Orthodox women's lifestyle podcast. And if you liked what you heard today, be sure to like our video and share with a friend or family member. Subscribe to our channel so that you can see when we have our next video uploaded.
And please give us comments. Let us know about your experience with head covering or any questions you have, and any future topic suggestions. Let's keep the conversation going. It's not a debate, it's a conversation. We love you. God bless you.